This summer, meet the magical mermaid at VGP Marine Kingdom from April 12th to May 31st.
Hello and welcome to the Federal. You're watching our program Off the Beaten Track, in which we take a 360-degree view of a very specific issue. The electoral marathon, which we have been running since March, when the Election Commission of India called for the 2024 Lok Sabha elections and assembly elections in a couple of states, that is coming to a close. How has the campaign gone? Within a few days, the entire focus is going to shift to the verdict. But before the verdict, we want to take a look at and try to understand how has this campaign proceeded, the various issues that have surfaced through it, because it is a fairly long period, almost 3 months of campaign. And if we actually factor in the developments in India from January, from the beginning of the inauguration of the Ram Temple on the 22nd of June, from that time, virtually India has been in election mode. So we are going to be talking about what this election mode has been, what have been the various issues and trends, who has said what are the various factors that have gone into this election. Quite undeniably, it is said that this is possibly one of the most important elections in Indian history. But then every election is very important. Maybe the next one would be even more important than 2024. So, who else does one turn to if one wants to talk about all these issues to take a macro view of everything? You obviously go and talk to one of the senior most political scientists of the country. So, I am joined by Professor Balveer Arora, who is, as I said, one of the senior most political scientists of the country, somebody who was in the Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU, in the School of Social Sciences, in the Department of Center of Political Sciences. So, Professor Arora, welcome to this program, and thank you very much for sparing time for us amid your busy schedule.
Thank you, Nilanjan.
Let me begin with the very elementary question that we are now coming to the fag end of the election campaign. What, according to you, have been the biggest trends and the most important issues that have figured?
Well, I think you've already mentioned that it's been a very long campaign.
Right.
And because it has been long, there are a number of features that have surfaced which need to be taken note of.
Right.
Firstly, the climate in which the campaign was launched in the middle of March. If you recall, there were two election commissioners. One suddenly quit for no publicly divulged reason, and two others were hastily appointed. They were uh, announced and notified by the president on the same day. So that sense of urgency also created an apprehension uh, of which was backed by a, long history of manipulation of institutions. I think
Right.
that created the setting for the election. It started with mistrust. It started with the fear of fraud. It started with the fear of institutional manipulation. Now, after that, you had a number of issues cropping up, and there again, what happened was that the projections of the party in power, the propaganda themes, and the way in which the voter was approached, strangely changed across the campaign from phase to phase. And that was one of the more interesting things to follow.
Okay.
Uh, most election campaigns are either based on promise or performance. Uh, the first election, 2014, was based on a series of promises that were made.
Right.
In 2019, it was a mix of promise and performance because a lot of things remained undone, notably the abrogation of Article 370 and the completion of the temple, which you
Right.
mentioned took place earlier this year. In the this present campaign in 2024,
Hmm.
it was neither of the two initially.
Right.
It was uh, a projection into the future, a
Okay.
glorious future, a global role which came on the back of the uh, full uh, exploitation of the possibilities offered by the presidency of the G20. And so that propelled India on the world stage with a lot of foreign visitors. And of course, then the question of the Amrit Kaal, the Viksit Bharat, and there was talk of space, there was talk of bullet trains, there was talk of all the things that made India a Vishwa Guru and a world admired across the world. So, this was the projection that was put forward in the beginning. The
Right.
fact that it was a long campaign had unintended consequences because the what showed up was, on the one hand, the collapse of the mainstream media.
Right.
The fact that in this campaign, the principal media actors were the social media and the YouTube channels, the other social media platforms, and the absence of the traditional media, both print as well as audiovisual, was striking in this election in terms of its
Okay.
uh, in terms of its weight and popularity. Then this last thing that I wanted to mention in this backdrop of the campaign was that the use of digital technology was at a slightly higher level compared to earlier elections. We have um, progressed in this for over the years, and I think it was something that was definitely playing a role in communication and in transmission of messages. I think this is the stage broadly that I see at the beginning of the campaign.
Right. And then, would you say that how did it evolve through the campaign? In terms of, you said that which were the issues that they focused on, that the ruling party, the BJP, focused on in the beginning. You very well pointed out, that this time there was no promise and there was no performance. It was actually more projection of the future, what we will do, and that too not on a very promissory note. It is said by a large number of media commentators that after the first phase of polling, suddenly the campaign issues which were highlighted by the ruling party took a vicious turn. Suddenly, one started hearing issues which were aimed at polarizing the electorate on lines of religious identity. Would you agree with this?
Yes, that was one of the major revelations as the campaign progressed. As part of a seven-phase campaign with different states involved and different issues involved, it is expected that as the campaign progresses, local issues will come to the fore. Because
Right.
when you are campaigning in a multi level federal system, you are uh, uh, have to uh, focus on local issues, particularly when you are confronted with state-based parties whose raison d'être is to serve the local issue.
To
So
the local issues.
yeah. So there is uh, that part, but what you are pointing to, which is the fact, is that as the campaign progressed, the shrillness
Okay.
and the appeal to sentiments which are explicitly forbidden by the Model Code of Conduct,
Mm-hmm.
uh, in which the Election Commission was approached, and instead of putting a stop to it, it sent off a vague letter to party uh, heads,
President.
presidents. And so that shrillness and that stridency of trying to appeal to communal sentiments, let's call them, call a spade a spade. This
Right.
was something that unfolded as the campaign developed. And then there were all sorts of contradictory statements. You couldn't make out much sense of the fact that one day a statement was made and the other day it was said, I would never say such a thing. So, the recordings are
I was
there.
never meaning to say this. You are actually misinterpreting and then actually giving a very emotional statement saying that if I say such things, then I don't have any business to be here where I am.
Exactly. But one doesn't count with the fact that everything is recorded and these tapes are there for everyone to see. They go
Eternity.
viral,
There,
and
little eternity.
the laughing stock to have to
True.
confront to different versions of the truth, shall we say, experiments with truth in a different sense.
Right. Sir, there is something which I just want to also point out. You mentioned about the traditional mainstream media actually collapsing, not doing the job of what the fourth estate is supposed to be doing, and that role has been taken up by the independent media. If one talks about audiovisual media, then it is through platforms like YouTube and various other places where clips have been circulated. And if it is actually the written word, then by various websites which are independently run.
Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to point out that you and I are also conversing on the platform, which is actually going to be, among others, also hosted on YouTube and the website of the Federal. So we are, in a way, representative of the kind of media to which you drew attention, and I wanted to thank you for drawing this very important point. You also mentioned about the election commission. I had intended to speak to you, but since you framed the entire trends and issues of the election with the begin from the beginning, with the turbulence in the election commission of India, when the elections were called. In fact, many believe that the calling of elections was delayed because the government could not actually appoint the one person, two people, one for the vacancy which had been caused a couple of months ago, and the other which dramatically happened in the course of the run up. If I ask you that, as a veteran political watcher and scientist, do an audit of the how the election commission has functioned, has it actually fulfilled the role by which this institution, which is really looked at, with great respect by Indians, has it actually played according to the role what it is expected to?
I think the jury is out on that question, Nilanjan. It's too early to answer it categorically,
Okay.
yes or no. I will just make two brief comments on this.
Okay.
One is that the credibility of public institutions is important for our democratic process. And that credibility is, on the one hand, the faith that the actors in the process have in the institution, and also the perception of the voter, the citizen, and the common man, as it were. Now,
Mhm.
the credibility of the democratic process hinges on the arbiter, the referee, the person, the institution which is supposed to impose a certain code of conduct
Hmm.
and impartially pull up those who violate it. Now, and this I am putting quite apart from the fear of fraud, the
Right.
fear of stealing the election, the fear of replacing EVM machines, blank machines with machines punched with votes. All that is something that will also surface, uh, particularly, and this is where credibility is important. The needless delay in publishing final voting figures is
Turnout
turnout, yes, that normally is a mechanical
process.
process which should be available very soon. The fact that this was delayed, the fact that the changes were made, and so on, indicates that either you can put it down to inefficiency, which is a serious enough charge against a public institution of this
Right.
kind, is that if it is not performing efficiently, it's a serious matter. Or it feeds into the credibility gap, that
Hmm.
the suspicion of fraud then gets nourished. And so I think you started by saying that this has been one of the most important elections in the history of Indian
India.
democracy. Yes, and I think the crucial nature of this election, coming as it did after uh, two full terms, uh, the backdrop of the collapse of intergovernmental relations in the previous period. All the agencies which work for center state relations and consultation with the states had become inoperative. And
Hmm.
the other, I'm putting this forward to you as a proposition that never have I heard the term federal and federalism used as often as in the last 5 years. That
Right.
the violation of the federal principle was proclaimed time and time again. So, against that backdrop, this election was crucial, and therefore the Election Commission was supposed to be on its best behavior and performance, and that is, I think, been seriously. Public confidence in it has been seriously eroded by
Eroded.
this.
Right. That's quite worrying that the public confidence in the election commission has got seriously eroded. I think this is a very grave observation, and we need to actually deliberate on the implications of this. Now, let us move a bit ahead on trying to understand that how this election has performed has proceeded from the side of the electorate. How have they responded? Trying to actually put it, do you see any discernible wave either in favor of any party or any individual or against it in this election? This question becomes important because the outcome of both the previous two elections, 2014 and 2019, were more or less certain. 2014, nobody knew the magnitude of the BJP's, number of seats which they will win. But it was understood that BJP had a very good chance of emerging as the single largest party in 2014. Likewise, in 2019, after the incidents in Pulwama and then the Indian government's response over some facilities in Balakot, it had become fairly clear that this issue had become a very emotionally driven uh, issue on the principle of hyper nationalism. This time and overarching, as a result of which it is often said that this has been not one single election, but it has been 543 disaggregated elections. Would you agree with this principle, or do you sense any kind of wave either in favor or against?
You're absolutely right. There is and was no discernible wave. I think what this election showed was two major things. One was that it, or is, because we are still in the election
Right,
process, uh, that it was converted into a plebiscite for or against a leader,
right,
a plebiscite for or against the supreme leader, and it was driven by a personality personalized to the extent that all the promises made by the party and by the government were the prime minister's promises, Modi guarantees, and Modi promises.
right,
So that extent of personalization was uh, in the context of no discernible wave in favor of a personality.
right,
Then intervened two or three elements which I think changed the character of the campaign.
mhm,
One was that, it's often been discussed in the context of the voting behavior, is that grave instances of inept governance, like demonetization or like COVID management, didn't seem to have any impact on voting behavior.
okay,
But I think the consequences of these events, which were in terms of uh, driving a good segment of the population below the poverty line, uh, the um ineptitude reflected in the non generation of livelihood and jobs, which kept them what is in technical terms known as pauperization.
right,
This was one thing. Secondly, what seems to have struck a responsive note is the declaration of the Supreme Court that the electoral bonds were illegal.
right,
That single event, to my mind, had an important psychological impact on much more. One would say that it didn't really affect people as directly as demonetization did or
right,
as COVID did. But the fact that this theft was taking place as the Chanda Chor sort of slogan that caught on, that this was uh, dishonesty, corruption, and this, I think, has had an impact as the campaign unfolded. Then I think the other thing that was remarkable about this election is the ruling party, after 10
yes,
years of being in power, was on the one hand poaching candidates from other parties.
that's right. In fact,
That
almost one third of the candidates of the BJP were those who originally did not belong to the BJP, people who have not actually risen vertically within the party fold.
They were what in administration is called lateral entrants.
That's
Uh,
right.
they came straight away and got the tickets. So that is one segment, a very important segment. The second segment is an equally important segment of previous candidates who had won elections not being repeated.
Right.
And I think that created some sort of an unease in the party cadres, and there was, on the one hand, different interpretations on the drop of participation across different phases. Uh,
Right.
there is, of course, there is the weather explanation, there is the heat, so there may be a slight
But, but we have
element.
had elections during the heat since 2004 onwards, 2004,
Yes.
2009, 14, 19. This is the fifth Lok Sabha election which is taking place in the middle of the summers.
Yes, so I think that one has to look elsewhere for explanation, and I think then the question comes is that who is not coming forward, taking the trouble to vote, and there are indications to show that the lack of enthusiasm of the cadres of the ruling party, uh, whether it be the lack of connect between the RSS and the BJP cadres, or the lack of enthusiasm of the BJP who have been uh, put aside or ignored, or and the benefit of nominations has gone to relatively newer entrants. So these are some of the changes
Right.
that were witnessed as the campaign uh, progressed. And then the last thing I would mention here is the use of state machinery to intimidate
Right.
opposition candidates.
Right.
I think that has been quite significant. Uh, in, the most striking, of course, was to arrest a, a sitting chief minister on charges which,
From two states. One is has
yes,
been in jail, even after the first one was actually released on bail by the Supreme Court.
right, absolutely. Now, to my mind, it is um, unless it is a criminal charge, uh, but on charges of evasion and um, uh, on corruption, vague charges, there should be a code of conduct that during elections, elected officials should not be put behind bars. You can do what you
Right.
want them once the election is over. But there is a certain immunity that is attached to the democratic
Right.
process, and that has to be respected.
Right. Uh, you were talking about the RSS and the BJP. I will try to come back to that issue, especially a statement made by the BJP president, if we have the time. But I would like to give you, like to hear you on what is your assessment of the opposition. We have talked about the ruling party quite a bit about their campaign, but how would you assess the performance of the opposition? The most important political party, that is obviously the Congress in the opposition side. Last year, for several months, it appeared that there would be a much larger number of seats where there would be one on one contests in the country. But eventually, it did not happen in almost every state. West Bengal was a very important state where it did not happen. But on the other side, Maharashtra, another very, the second largest state in terms of the number of seats, there was a fair amount of opposition consolidation. Also, the personality of Rahul Gandhi. It is somebody who started from a very low public image. He used to be referred to very derogatorily as Pappu by the ruling party, but there has been a kind of a transformation through the Bharat Jodo Yatra, through the opposition parties' realization that they needed to work together. We've seen in Delhi the Aam Aadmi Party and the Congress working together and being fairly, coordinating their activities fairly well.
Yes, I think this campaign has revealed a number of facets. On the question of the BJP RSS relations and linkages, you, Nilanjan, are the most qualified, and so I'll wait to hear your views on it. As far as the image of Rahul Gandhi is concerned, uh, I think it has undergone a change. And the two Bharat Jodo Yatras contributed, no doubt, but also the fact that he has his pronouncements have become more issue based and have begun to sound convincing, and therefore on the India alliance, I would say one is that electorally it has worked in some states, may not have worked in others. Bengal is an example where
Right.
electoral, even friendly electoral contexts were not avoided. But it is significant that Mamata Banerjee has said that she will support the India alliance from the outside. I think
Right.
that declaration is important because we are in the election period, and a pre electoral alliance, when it comes to inviting the next leader to
By
form
the
a government
president.
by the president, this will have to be taken into account that the alliance has the committed support of parties which have openly declared that they will support. So it is significant for the India alliance. I think it, to my mind, it's worked well in states where it matters. Probably
Right.
better in UP than in the other states. Better in Delhi
Bihar,
if
it has
you.
been good. Bihar,
Mhm.
it has been very. Bihar, it has been a fairly effective opposition, fairly
Bihar,
good coordination. Yes.
yes, you're right. Bihar, UP, Delhi, it's worked beautifully because they're out of 7 seats. The division is quite clear. They are
Right.
been divided. So now the question is that this alliance has become the major challenger. The Congress leadership being the most critical component, and you sense in the types of campaign rhetoric that is emerging in these final phases that there is a certain level of anxiety, I would even say desperation, that is emerging um, from the fear of losing the
Right.
election. And that is something that is the, as we reach the end of this process very soon, something that is noticeable.
Right. I think you have taken us through this entire period. We are now very anxiously going to wait for the remaining period, the remaining phases of the elections to be over, and then the big day on the 4th of June. You have hinted about being invited to form the government. So, the President of India is going to play a huge role, whether it is going to be a mechanical call to the single largest party in the case of a hung verdict, no party getting a clear majority, or whether a pre poll alliance is taken into factor. Those are issues which we will have to navigate. And I hope that in the next coming weeks, I will once again speak to you and discuss these issues further. But as far as this election is concerned, this campaign is concerned, the various issues that have surfaced, the various challenges which have emerged, you have actually summed it up very aptly, and for which we can actually say nothing but a very big thank you.
This summer, meet the magical mermaid at VGP Marine Kingdom from April 12th to May 31st.